Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. We're just gonna give it another minute. I know Nancy and Amanda were gonna be joining. They were waiting in the waiting room. And then I think we're gonna need one more.
Yeah, you're right.
Susan Rothermick says she's still spinning. Whoop. All right, I got them.
Okay.
But maybe Susan was still celebrating yet another national championship for UConn. Huh?
I have my T-shirt on from 2014 with men and women championship.
There
So-
you go.
I'm wearing it.
Oh,
Susan, I didn't know you went to UConn.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Did you play?
No, not basketball. I played tennis.
We're a big UConn household. My father-in-law went there, and my husband grew up in Connecticut. So they've been longtime UConn fans. I think they went to like one of the women's championships way back.
Yeah.
Fun, so fun to watch.
Oh yeah. No, big
Sure.
fan, big fan. I paid a lot of money to go to that school. They better win.
Okay, so I just texted a couple of the people who are not here.
Nancy was in the waiting room. I was chatting
Well,
with her.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I mean, well, I want her to join, but Nancy doesn't help.
That's right. We're done.
Because you're one vote between you. So yeah, we need I think is there select board tonight?
Jim said we're live now, just so everyone
No.
knows.
Okay. Well, for those who might be watching, we are awaiting a quorum at the moment. We did have some technical difficulties getting into the meeting. So hopefully we will get, I've just texted a couple of people and hopefully we'll get that additional person and we can get started.
John, I had wrongly assumed that this was an in-person meeting. So
Oh, geez. Sorry.
So that's the reason I'm late.
Well, I mean, we weren't able to get into the Zoom, so nobody even noticed. So.
Should we be recording this meeting?
If we're on HCAM, do we need to? I mean, it probably doesn't hurt from a minutes perspective. It's probably helpful, right?
you can record it once you call it to order, or you could do it now, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. I guess what I'm wondering is we don't have a quorum, so could I call it to order and rearrange the agenda? Maybe we start with the design presentation because there isn't a vote associated with that. And then hopefully we get the additional person before we do the controls and minutes. I mean, minutes, if we don't get the minutes tonight, I don't really worry about it, but the controls, I know you need to vote on, right, Jeff?
Yes.
And I think I'm not as well versed on the OML stuff as maybe I once was. I think we just can't vote without a quorum, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so why don't we do that? I'll call the meeting to order at 6:15. welcome everyone to the meeting of the Elementary School Building Committee. I will quickly review the agenda, which I will then ask the committee to take out of order. We'll have our public comment opportunity. We will approve minutes. We don't have invoices to approve, but do we have? And I don't think we have any updates on costs authorized under the sort of small cost vote we took a while back. So we'll do a design materials boards, colors, and themes presentation by Bob. We'll review and potentially approve the automation controls consultant proposal and the contract amendment for Vertex as OPM. And then we'll do an update on schedule, permitting, and public outreach, and then look to adjourn. So if there are no objections, while we hopefully get an additional member, Bob, if you want to go ahead with the design presentation, that would be great.
Just want to make sure I can share. I'm not seeing a share button. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yep.
Yep.
So what I want to share with everybody is the process that we've gone through. We, as you all know, actually was a request of the building committee that we put together a teacher collaboration team to explore the theming and connect that to the design, to education. So what you have up on the screen right now are the members. We had second grade teacher in Beth. We had Molly and Renuka representing third grade, and we had Jess Esdale in fourth grade. We had music, library media specialists. Of course, David and Michelle joined us, and Carol and Susan. And there were about 4 design team members and on and off several from Vertex. So we had about 15 of us involved in the process. And I'm just going to walk you through what we did. So this says schedule ahead. This is actually looking back now. Where we are is the black line that goes vertical. We held 4 workshops. It started in mid-February, and it carried through with 3 in March. In each one of those workshops, we kind of started a little bit backwards. What we did is we shared with the teachers group our initial thoughts for Elmwood, but we opened it really wide to think about, you know, the appropriateness of where we're going with natural themes, to rethink if we should be doing something different. We shared where this leads through the example of Easton Elementary School, the Blanche A. Ames Elementary School. And that was also one of the schools that was toured. So we're able to show how the theming there was very specific to that town, how it translated into educational components and fun things in the school and opportunities. So that was to kind of give some perspective to the group. And then we also discussed, you know, what is Hopkinton specific? What is the wealth of things that we can look to and explore? And of course, you know, as expected, the natural resources and connections to nature came up and really were supported. In the next 2 meetings we held in early March, we then started to take the themes, and they evolved. It originally was meadow, forest, and marsh. We changed it to lake and actually river, I think is where we landed in the end, but still connecting to nature, you know, specific to the wonderful resources in Hopkinton. You can see in the backlay slide, we spent some time, did some interactive exercises, just connecting meadow, forest, and river to colors, to flora, to fauna, to Hopkinton specific things. So it was just sort of a notepad to gather ideas and what everyone was thinking. Down on the bottom right, that diagram shows kind of a sticker board. It's actually called a Miro board. And what we did here is we went through each of the 7 major subject matters. And we also looked at second, third, and fourth grade. And we just started to talk about what are some key things being taught and being learned. What is the curriculum path or pattern, the content that the students are learning, And this really kind of gives us great background to see what connections we can make. We also talked about the extent to which we would carry these themes into the school. And I think what resonated highly among the entire group was to really keep it simple, natural, beautiful, not overcomplicated, and not to be too prescriptive in, for example, assigning every single neighborhood of classrooms a specific icon or creature. Really just wanted to follow the broader themes of meadow, forest, and lake. And so we did that through the first two meetings. Also in those meetings, we started to put together preliminary boards. So you can see here, meadow, forest, and river. We started to gather some thoughts on color, applying it to the materials that we'll be using in the school, some of the imagery from local landscape and natural resources, some icons that are connected to those. This was kind of fun. And then what we did is we then dove a little bit deeper and looked at, of all the curriculum things that we learned, how can these become architectural elements? How can we use, the flooring, for example, or, patterns on the wall, or in the landscape? What simple things can we do that would create opportunities? So you can see these 20 things were assembled. Actually, there's 2 or 3 more that came up in our very last meeting. And so these are all things that we're going to explore. The next few slides I can show you, we went through each of the 7 content areas. You can see I've highlighted on the right the types of things that would actually connect to the curriculum. So on the far left, you can see a simple landscape element that if you stand in the center, can tell you what time it is. Kind of a fun element. There's been a lot of talk about tagging the elevations. This can be in the landscape with kind of a plaque or a post. This can also be throughout the building as you navigate stairwells, different floor levels, even just the ground floor plane, as you all recall, rises 4 feet inside the building. So these things will connect to nature, connect to learning. And this is just map. I won't dwell on each one of these in great detail, but you can see in ELA, there are things connected to plants and animals. So this can be a fun way, whether it's message stones, or on the far left is it's a rain reveal spray that goes on concrete. Doesn't last forever, but it can be applied periodically. It could be a fun thing just as we open the building that you can put down a stencil, and when it rains, you can reveal poetry or quotes. And this is actually something that occurred in Boston for at least a period of time. I don't know if it's still ongoing. Just some fun things here. Science and STE is ripe with ideas. We talked about STE spaces and just outside having a 2-story space that can be used for experiments like egg drops or parachutes, but also using the wall space just outside the rooms for this kind of a peg wall where gears and pulleys and other things can be kind of a toolkit of things that students can use. This is an image from our Easton Elementary School where we actually did this type of thing. Moving on, social science, lots of wonderful ideas about the naming of trails, paths that connect to the outdoor landscape, but also corridors within the school that lead you to some of the major spaces. So we can certainly have fun with how we do that, make it look like a trail signage. There's an opportunity, we heard about, having maps of Massachusetts, of the United States, of the world, but also Hopkinton is rich with some wonderful resources. We can imagine that this being in the landscape or possibly even being in the lobby, kind of carved into or laser cut into the flooring that we have in the main lobby. Art and music, of course, connecting with colors and also nature, health and wellness. There's a lot of things we can do here. A dashboard in the lobby of the school can be kind of an interactive electronic piece that can connect to curriculum. So if students are learning about the skeletal system, which they do, that you can connect this to the building structure, for an example, as a very relevant sort of learning tool. And the last few, library media, of course, a lot of literature. We'll have display cases throughout the school and opportunities to have elements that are timeless, kind of teaching moments, and then just to show you how this is wrapping up with the colors and the materials. These are the materials that we've talked about using, durable, economical. On the top left, you can see wall paint colors, and although that might look like a lot of colors, they're not ever used all at once. The common materials have a underline score, so you can see, you know, the white, but then some natural kind of browns and greens, neutral colors will carry throughout the school. So there'll be a little kind of connection throughout the school of that. And then for each one of the themed areas, there'll be a certain color. And what we talked about is maybe having a different shade of that color that takes you from first, second to third floor. So not introducing too many colors, but using the same color to define an entire wing and just have it gradated. There are areas where we will use a pop of color, say at the wet wall to the toilet rooms. So we know that's a wall that's facing the corridor, but it's recessed. So it's a wall that can be nicely tiled, have a pop of color, but it's also suppressed a little bit because it's not the main wall of the corridor, for example. It's really recessed, set back, so it's a place to have fun with color, but not to create an overstimulating environment. Of course, natural woods work their way through. So the meadow, we chose wildflowers as some of the inspiration. So we get into the purples. For the forest, because we've already got, you know, browns and beiges, we're going into the oranges, which are representative of leaves, acorns, even fungi. So these are the primary colors there, and you can see the accents change. And then finally, river, which naturally goes into some of the blues or turquoise colors. What the teachers helped us assemble this and helped guide the direction. And as we summed it all up with the group, there was real strong kind of passion for how it came together, how the colors complement each other, how the overarching theme is really just, kind of calming and natural. And that's kind of wraps up the overview. I'd invite Carol, Susan, or David, if there's anything I missed or could be underscored, by all means. And certainly we'll take any questions.
Any questions?
Did you guys hear me? My mic was up.
Oh yeah, we heard you.
Okay.
We would have clued in before then.
I know, but I wasn't looking at any of you, so sorry.
No, I'll just say that it was a really great process with the teachers, and I think it fits nicely with what we've done with the naming. So there's a lot, I think, that can be done on the inside of the building to kind of bring back some of the names that weren't chosen. So things like Headwaters or Quinnipiquin, those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, and I know, Bob, I said this when we talked on Thursday, but when we last talked about this, as you mentioned, like the key direction, I think, from the committee was we're not the ones who want to make these decisions. We want the teachers, the administrators who are going to be using the building to really lean into the design here. And so really appreciate you outlining the process, because it's clear that that's exactly what happened. And I think that's what's most exciting for me about this, is how much ownership they were able to take of this.
Yeah, Bob, thing I'll mention, it's very impressive, everything you shared. And as John mentioned, you can tell a lot of thought went into it. So obviously the only the only concern is, all right, how do we put some numbers to this as we go forward? And it feels like we're going to be able to have a very good looking inside of the school and still be able to maintain the fiscal responsibility that I know we've been focusing on. So it's very impressive. I had no idea that it would be this much detail. So thank you and your team for doing so.
Sure. And just so the committee's aware, these aren't ads. These are things that we typically build into schools. And as we get the cost estimates in and we reconcile, we will carry themes forward, but they can be done very inexpensively. Graphics, paint, and a few other things, smart choices go a long way.
All right, well, excellent. Appreciate the update. We're going to move on to, so Shahidul has joined us. Thank you for jumping in. I know we have you until 7 o'clock. So we want to switch to, I think, what is the most critical topic for tonight, which is the proposal for the controls engineer. Jeff, is that you?
Yep.
Okay.
So good evening. I want to talk a little bit about a potential consultant we could bring onto the project, which is the Integral Data Systems. And so to get there, we first got to kind of back up and refocus on where we are in the overall process of evolution, right? And so one of the things is that, you know, this building is going to be more energy efficient than any other building the town has ever done before. Traditionally, buildings were done with, you know, simple boilers. Over the past decade or so, they added, you know, more complex control systems, building information management systems to that. Then they added lighting controls. You know, those have only continued to grow in complexity over time. Now we're looking at a geothermal system and an all-electric building, also with a goal of a low energy use intensity, which comes with a carrot of additional funding back from Eversource. So at the completion of the project, when you turn over the building to the occupants, they really need to understand how it's operating and dial it in to get the most optimal use and energy efficiency out of the building. It's no longer the turnover of the keys and turn the boiler system on and, you know, make sure you get training and you're on your way. You know, there's a lot of work that happens in that first year of the project in terms of post-occupancy fine tuning of the systems. And that comes from a few different levels. You know, first and foremost, there's your design team validating that the construction team implemented the building appropriately. You know, that's already built into the system. Then the MSBA layers in their commissioning agent, where they come in, they do a representative tests of the system, not the entirety of the system, but they take a sampling of 25 to 50% of different components and do commissioning on those elements. And so that's built into the overall project already. Two other layers of things that we're going to talk about tonight and moving forward are where we measure the building from there on out. So one would be to fine tune the systems and tracking the data. And that's one of the things we're here to talk about today. And another one I think that Chris might have talked about with you at a recent meeting was the codes will change next year. And so in order to get the MSBA's higher level of sustainability reimbursement and to meet the future building code changes, we're going to have to follow through with a passive house requirement, and that's certification. And so there's another consultant set aside to deal with that, which we're going to authorize at a future meeting. But for tonight's focus, it's to talk about the data. So one of the consultants that we've been working with on a few recent projects is IDS, which is Integral Data Systems. And what they do is they do work up front with the design team to first meet with your facility director, understand the goals of the overall project, and then put in data points into the specification so that when the project gets built, we're monitoring the right levels of systems and the right points so that after this group is all long gone and it's just the schools occupying the building, they have the ability to monitor, track, and fine tune the system. And so that's what IDS does. I'm going to share a couple of slides and kind of talk about what they do and then talk about the proposal and their effort in post-occupancy. So I asked IDS to come up with a couple of examples that they can talk about for tonight. And so a couple of recent examples here up on the screen here. They're monitoring the usage of a building, right, over a daily, weekly, and monthly process. And what they were finding on this particular example is that the building was operating over the weekend in a cycle that it shouldn't have. And so what that ultimately does is we're using a lot more energy over the weekends when it's in unoccupied mode. That would normally not be the case. In this example, instead of a 275 kilowatts, it was coming in at 500 kilowatts, which is causing your utility bill to go up. This is a recent example that I asked them to pull. Another one here has to do with, you know, how you monitor systems. And again, you know, they're routinely, hourly accessing the data. And this works on new buildings best, right? They can work in some of the more recent modern buildings, but, you know, controls at this level don't go back to the buildings of the 80s and 90s, you know, so this is optimization of buildings that are being built in today's day and moving forward. And so in this particular example, you know, they were able to find that the building was operating again in a weekend in a different life cycle. And so the costs that the town was expending was an additional $2,000 per weekend. And this was found to be running over 4 weekends before they went and looked back at the data and was able to troubleshoot the issue and then address the controls that were not operating fully. Now, the addressing is they're not the one physically doing it. They're finding the issue, then notifying the contractor involved and having them replace it. The best time to do this is the first year of warranty. And so the majority of the proposal that we're asking tonight to present to the committee is that 1 year warranty. It's about 15 months. And so really we're trending the data early on as soon as the building gets turned over and finding the issues or early on when you still have the ability to put that back on the contractor that did the work and get them to resolve it at no cost versus having your own supplier come in and adjust the programming post-occupancy 1 year beyond that. Another example here had to do with the O2 sensors in the building and short cycling of systems causing another system to run in occupied mode. And it was identified unnecessary equipment was oscillating during unoccupied mode, causing a higher rate of all these units to run and a higher utilization of power. Now, with the Mass Save program, they allow you to determine when you're ready to bring them in. And that's when they start to monitor a year's worth of data. And so we want to go through a process where we fine tune the system before we start the count with the Eversource so that we make sure we get that extra $1.25 incentive point at the end of that year long of data. So IDS would come on first after occupancy, tracking the data to fine tune it. And when the school system is ready, then they would notify Eversource we're ready to track it. This model, the data we're collecting is the data that then goes to Eversource. And so we're monitoring it in real time and adjusting as necessary in order to make sure that we're able to receive those rebates. A couple of other examples we just put into the overall in your meeting packet here. Really understanding the root cause of the spaces where the temperature controls are issue. It could be duct sensors that need to be relocated. It could be O2 sensors that need to be put in different locations. So in some cases, it could be actual change order work to fine tune a system. You know, the design team did their best effort. They specified where sensors are going, but because of the way the building operates as a living, breathing thing, perhaps a sensor in a different location can turn the systems on or off at a more appropriate interval. And so there may be some miscellaneous movement of sensors post-occupancy to really fine tune the building itself. So even though the building runs and operates well, this is really trying to get that operating cost of the building down. So those are just a couple examples that I wanted to kind of share with the overall committee. I won't go through the entirety of the fine detail of IDS's proposal, but Integral Data Systems is the consultant here. They included their proposal in your packet. The fee breakdown was on page 5. And it breaks down to a few things. So low-level fee in the design process, so this $25,000 is where they get involved early on. They help review and make recommendations, working with the facilities department and the MEP design engineers to get the right information on the specifications. There's a light level of involvement with construction in terms of submittal reviews and RFIs associated with those control points and support as we're getting to the commissioning phase of the project at the end of construction. But their real lift happens in that post-occupancy 15 months when they're really trending the data. They do have adders here that we're not recommending at this point, which is to help with Mass Save incentive rebates and helping them pull all that information together for Mass Save. And then extended monitoring on beyond that, which roughly is about $24,000 a year, but reduces over time with a longer extended period. That's something the school system can choose to exercise after you've gone through that first year and see if there's real value and if there's a continued value in keeping them on board. IDS has worked on 2 projects that Vertex is on currently. One of them is in construction about 50% of the way at this point. So they've only done the first 2 stages of this proposal on that particular job. The other one is the town of Westwood. They just opened their building on February vacation. So they're in that 1 month period where they've just completed their first month of data. And they're having a meeting this week to meet with all the warranty consultants to give that feedback back. And so we'll have more information moving forward on this project as to how that works in the 15-month stage. But there are starting to see benefits already in that particular project that was just opened 5 weeks ago. So, you know, Vertex believes this is a good investment of time. You know, one other thing that I will note here and do want to discuss One of the things MSBA is doing and did back on the Marathon School was post-occupancy surveys of the towns. Marathon was a good project that had a nice clean turnover and a good training program that Vertex and the town participated in. The MSBA came back a few years later inquiring about how that's going. And this is a problem that they're finding with many other towns in terms of the complexity that after all the consultants go away the first year, it's a challenge for these towns to actually have the right staff in place and the right consultants in place and the right knowledge base on their facility staff. So they're having one of their upcoming forums in the month of May, talking specifically about post-occupancy. And, this type of consultant is one of the things that's on the table of really trying to help these communities get involved. And they've asked myself and Tim Persons to come back and do an update on Marathon lessons learned then, how we're building on that today on the Elmwood project, and how we're looking to be prepared for tomorrow when the town opens up this all-electric geothermal system that's got to meet these low EUIs and passive house. And so it's really a step and an interim step in the process. And so we believe this is the right step in that process. And so, Vertex recommends moving forward with IDS. We've met with Susan and Tim a few times. IDS came in and had a presentation to them. And I'll let Susan talk tonight because I don't think Tim's here about how they viewed those services.
Yeah, Tim and I did talk about this, and the piece that's interesting is this type of control where you can see the trend data. The controls that we have in the other buildings, you don't get that data. So we would need to enhance our controls in order to see that type of data. But the closest thing we can compare it to is we have systems like that on our walk-in fridge and freezers. And so we do see the trend data of, the compressor going up and down, and we're able to respond to it right away. That's the type of thing that they'll do for us in that first monitoring period and really kind of flush out all the kinks in the system and help us get the schedules right. Like Jeff said, something as simple as a CO2 may be causing a damper to open and close too fast, so it does have a lot of value, especially for a building this size.
And then before we open it up for questions, Jeff, so this is this is not in the original budget, but fits in with one of the contingencies?
That's correct. So there's a $300,000 line item for other administrative costs that was meant to deal with enhanced commissioning in a general sense, which will pick up that future consultant for the passive house, which is around, I think, 80 or 90,000 for that phase of work. And then this proposal as well would fit within that. And so that was what that bucket was set aside for. So these are in line, with the amount of money that we earmarked for the future sustainability challenges and goals that we'll have to rise up to meet.
Okay. Questions? Bill, I saw you come off mute.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff, for all that information. Couple questions. Once those two items you just described are used out of that $300,000 budget, is there anything else coming down the line that also would need to tap into that money, or are these the two big ones that you just mentioned?
These are the two larger ones. And I will note that that's a line item well outside of the contingency. You have $3 million in contingency, which is really the general fund of, unknowns, right? This was a known element. And so anything that would come up down the road would come out of that other general bucket of contingencies for issues that arise. There may be some things that come up with NEPA. That's the one big risk on this project, that because you're at the mercy of state agencies, you're submitting a package to all the state agencies. They all have the ability to comment on NEPA. We don't know what will come out of that. But from a known standpoint, this is the known risks that we're aware of. And that those millions of dollars in contingency are meant to pick up those other unknown risks.
Okay. My other question, what were Tim's thoughts? And Susan shared that. So my last question is, are there any competitors in this space? And did we take a look at them?
So it's a good question. It's a newer space, and so people are popping up and doing different levels of that. So there are other entities out there. This is the one that we're familiar with and has worked on a few projects that we've worked on with. There's not a holistic bench of them out there, but it's a newer trend. So no, we did not solicit multiple proposals for this project.
Okay, thanks. Your comfort level seems enough, and Tim's on board, so I appreciate the details. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions. So, Jeff, you said Vertex recommends this service for 1 year post-occupancy. Is that right?
That's correct.
For the first year. Now, without this service, how does the troubleshooting happen in that first year post-occupancy?
So from a variety of sources and not as deep of a dive, is the simplest way of saying that. So the commissioning agent will tell us whether the system is functioning properly or not. So if rooms are overheating or things are not working from a functional standpoint, that higher level of information will be caught by the commissioning agents. Before you get to that point, the design team will make sure we're substantially complete. So there's that first pass of the design engineer signing off. Then you get to the functional testing of the commissioning agents. And then after that, it's up to the school at that point to kind of monitor the system. You know, the design consultants' contracts don't continue on post substantial completion, post punch list resolution. The MSBA's commissioning comes back 10 months later, but that's a survey to the school. How are things running? What's working well? What's not working well? Are there things that we should report back on your behalf? It's not them getting into this level of detail and really fine tuning your system. So the short answer is it's a gap in scope, in the sense of it's relying that your town and every other town in the state has the sophistication of facility staff that can really do this level of monitoring. And that's not something that has existed in other towns. They're starting to hire people that can do that. Many other towns are starting to hire facility staff that understand it at a higher level and can spend some time on it. And certain towns are further ahead than others, but many towns don't have anywhere near the ability to do that. So they would have to outsource that to some vendor to monitor those things.
If I understand this correctly, the benefit of this service would be that you are more likely to pick up issues within that first year that sometimes, if you didn't have them, you might pick up later. And the other is there's maybe a value add where it's not just issues that you pick up, but even optimizations or value adds, right?
Right. That's our understanding as well, that that's really where the benefit of this approach is, that it's really fine tuning the system when you have access to leverage it on those that did the installation, and also looking for, short cycling issues or running in unoccupied mode. I mean, one of the things, that Tim will drive himself nuts with in the beginning is there's tons of sensors on this building, and many of them can conflict with each other. The placement of sensors, the confliction of sensors giving different information, that in itself takes time. Earlier buildings, even as recent as, Marathon, it was a boiler, and, it calls for the demand of heat to go on, and many rooms are banked in one continuous run. There's a lot more subdividing of the building with these systems. And so that requires a higher level of fine tuning than even a building that was built 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
If I had a quick question, thanks for the elaborate information, and it certainly find it intriguing and great to see that there are optimization opportunities with data collection and then continuous monitoring. If you can refresh, you may have gone over this. So I see two components of the data and the service. One is the sensors, installing them and setting those up, and the system setup. And second is the consulting. I didn't actually go through the details of the numbers, but can you refresh the key components and the
Sure. So in all cases, IDS is a consulting firm, right? So at the end of the day, the designer will do all these specifications. What IDS provides in the design phase is a peer review of the design specifications, drawings, and we'll do a detailed review at each major milestone. They'll also sit with Tim, understand how he operates the other buildings in your district, to understand the issues that occur in those buildings and what he wants to avoid in this building, to make sure we're getting the right level of control specified within the system. That'll be kind of support and eyes and ears for the school system. And then in the construction phase, they'll keep an eye over the shoulder of the design team to make sure the RFIs and the submittals don't undo, what the specifications were meant to do related to those controls types items. And then they'll start to keep an eye on the commissioning agent at the end of construction, again, to make sure that they're keeping in line with the architecture that was really intended on this project from a control standpoint, controls architecture. And then they really go to work, as soon as the building is ready to be tracked and monitored. And that's where they then track data, churn it through, and get back information to the consultants and contractors.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So there is no cost anticipated or any more cost anticipated for sensors or any other equipment. Those are already accounted for. Is that right?
There can be. I mean, ultimately, we're at the beginning of design, and so there's a design contingency. So we'll have to certainly manage the overall number. We set a number at town meeting. We've got to live within that number. So we can't go willy-nilly just adding controls everywhere, because, controls draw power too, right? So we want to make sure it's the right balance. And, the project team is responsible for managing the number. And so we'll make sure we fit within the number. But there will be, the controls are more conceptual at the schematic design level, so they're not drawn yet. And so we've got $1 per square foot allowance for all the controls on the project. That may go up, but as we start to whittle down other elements of the project, the design contingency and escalation also start to fall off. And so it should all be balanced in the end.
Thank you. That makes sense. But I think it's fascinating, and the value is certainly there. Thanks.
I'd like to ask Susan, I think the school committee had commissioned some point-to-point testing of our existing buildings. Is this at all the same, conceptually, the same kind of service as what we did on our sort of legacy systems in the past?
So light. So this is what we did for the high school. Obviously, retro commissioning has not happened since we opened the high school building. So they've never gone back and said, okay, so if I say damper 1 open and close, does damper 1 open and close? So we went through that process with the high school. And as a result, of course, we found all this equipment that was not functioning properly. So that was really a test to see what was responding to the controls, the building management system. The data is, you have a compressor, and again, I'll go back to the refrigeration. You have a compressor that's running, and you know that it should run between this temperature and this temperature, and it should cycle. But if you see it short cycling, meaning it just keeps turning on, that's the data, that's the trend data that this gets at, which we don't have the controls other than at the high school to even get trend data other than the walk-ins. So it's a little bit different. And again, this will be done as part of the design to make sure things are designed properly. But then with the commissioning, which is your initial turn on of a building, are your schedules right? Is it functioning the way it was supposed to be designed? What we did was way down the road, is the equipment even responding to the building management system? Does that make sense?
That's helpful. Yeah, that's helpful. I guess I'm curious, where this is a relatively new field, this type of building monitoring, and we have limited experience with this vendor, and there aren't many vendors in the field. So all those things being said, is there an opportunity to connect some of the fees associated with this vendor and this contract with outcomes? There oftentimes, when there's a contractor who is, pitching a service in a field that's a bit unproven, the outcomes that they can commit to, some base level of outcomes, efficiency levels or optimization or, whatever, can be, I'm not first in this particular field, but can be pinned, have the fees tied to that. So they have to produce so they have to prove themselves in this unproven field to earn 100% of the fees, if you know what I mean. Is that kind of negotiating done in this space at all?
I don't know if that's done, but it's not necessarily unproven. The thing is that there's a gap. And there's a gap where mechanical engineers design a sequence of operations and then they're done at the end of the job and they leave. And this entity comes in and actually understands that, reviews it, becomes really familiar with it, and they're able to help you troubleshoot and run your building the way it's supposed to be running. So I think that's really it's almost like there was a missing piece here as things have gotten more and more sophisticated. Mechanical engineers and the people who design those systems don't necessarily have it in their fees or time to chase this around with the owner to figure out why the vestibule isn't working the way they want or why the main office isn't. And that's what this company does, is they actually really dig in to this. So I'm not sure that there would be a way to kind of make them performance-based cost.
It's hard because you're relying on, how good did everybody else do in the equation, right? You'd be tying their proposal to hoping, or they'd be hoping that somebody screwed up so that they could then provide the value, like, your contractor was terrible and here's all the value that I brought to you. And so it's really hard to do that here. We'll have filed sub-bidding, there are a lot of tried and true contractors, but there'll always be challenges. There will be value they give, but it's hard to, I think, make it measurable, because they're moving, the utility costs are moving, the equipment is changing. One of the challenges with controls is that, with the systems, the built-in controls with individual units, but then as a building, Tim will have an overall vendor that does the controls of the building. And one of the things that becomes an issue at commissioning and at the start of this is, are they conflicting with each other? Did they work in harmony, or are there defaults there, or do we need to remove one or the other because one's overriding the other? And so there's lots of those things that get fixed quickly before it becomes a cost, which makes it challenging for them to anchor it to the value add they bring back. I do want to mention that I didn't bring this proposal initially at the highest level that it was at. We've been working them down. They first pitched us back in January, and the proposal was $157,000 when I first talked to Tim and Susan about it. And so, I told them that was not going to work for us on this project, that we've got to sharpen your pencil, take a harder look at it. What can we do to get that number down? And so ultimately I got the 157 down to, 126. And so we got a $30,000 reduction. I do have copies of the original proposal that I can throw up there just so you know, but it's a lot of money, right? And so, we wanted to challenge them to make sure they weren't just using a generic dollar per square foot of the building, which is their initial pricing scheme, is how they start to look at these. But then I gave them the drawings of schematic design. I said, this is our system, like really take a look at it if you're interested in the project, and let's get down to what it'll take for you to manage this job. And so that's kind of where we landed. And I was able to bring it from the 157 down to 126.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions, so Jeff, we need a vote to approve the proposal.
So if you want to take a vote, we can do it with the contract amendment. So Vertex will carry them under ourselves as a procurement process. And so you've also taken 2 recent votes for the site work from a proposal standpoint for Deanna to first do the roadway onto the site, and then second to do a bunch of test bits in the month of March. So I've rolled that all into one contract amendment to kind of clean up all those individual votes. So I have the amendment that was included in your packet, which has the $20,075 and the reimbursement for that Deanna work for the site improvements and the test pit work, and then the IDS controls package with the markup. All that totals $158,675, which is what's in the your proposal for review and authorization.
Okay, so if that's the case, I would seek a motion to approve the Vertex OPM contract amendment in the amount of $158,675 to reflect the previously authorized site work and the controls proposal.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Bill, second by Shahidul. We're roll call because we're remote. So Jagroot,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Shahidul,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So it is unanimous, 5-0. And so that is approved. And
The only other vote you have was the minutes. I don't know.
yeah, so I was going to say, so
Shahidul,
Shahidul, I know you have to drop off. Thank you for jumping on. Why don't you go? Jeff, let's just kick the minutes to the next meeting. Okay.
Thank you. Good seeing you all.
All right.
Good
Thanks,
progress.
Shahidul. All right.
Thank
Okay. And then, so the last thing was just update on permitting process, et cetera.
Yep. So we're in the pipeline for getting ready to submit to the MEPA. And then at the same time, we're also working with Planning Board and Concom from an agent standpoint, as well as DPW and the fire department. So all those meetings with the individual agents for the town or representatives of those groups have been occurring over the last 3 months, since January into now, with Dan's team and all his consultants. I have another one tomorrow. I had one yesterday. So we're really trying to churn through all that information to make sure that the building itself and the improvements on Hayden Row are all flushed through with those groups. And so we're going to have more information to talk about Hayden Row at your next meeting, because we were able to get that meeting yesterday and churn through some of that information. And so we're still coming back to DPW and fire department with some clarifications on a few items. The goal is to take the package that goes to the MSBA and have that be the package that's ready to go to all these boards. And so as far as the schedule goes, the drawings came out a week and a half ago. That's being reviewed by Vertex's team internally. We're having reviewing it for architectural and civil and structure and things like that. And we're going to give comments back to Dan's team. Your MSBA commissioning agent is also reviewing it from an MSBA standpoint. The estimators are pricing that. And so all that work will come to a head next week, where we do an estimate reconciliation and have an updated budget to present to the building committee on the 23rd. And so if there's value engineering necessary, then we'll come with a list of ideas. If there's not, then we'll have a report out on where we are with the overall cost of the project. That's scheduled for that meeting. At that meeting on the 23rd, we're going to talk about the Hayden Road design of the improvements there. And then we're going to look for your authorized vote to submit the package to the MSBA later that week. And so the package that goes into the MSBA is the drawings and specs we already have. The estimate will do an update to the project schedule and budget. It's much lighter than the previous submissions that you guys have reviewed that are much thicker documents. This is now really shifting more towards the plans and specs, but we've got to give updates to those other items that I just mentioned. One of the other items that we're looking for the design team to provide, and Dan, I think, has a draft copy of it, is the energy model. Right, we're looking to validate that we are in fact going to be below 25 EUI and that we are able to still get those rebates. So that report will also come at the 23rd. So there's a lot of work that the consultants are doing over the month of April to get ready for that submission the last week of April, and that's going to go to the MSBA on Monday, the 29th. At the same time, we'll be submitting to MEPA, and I think we're going to do that the 2 days before that on the 26th by the end of that week, because the hard deadline with MEPA is by May 15th. So we want to make sure we're not up against that. We take those same drawings that are already ready now, get that into MEPA, get the submission to the MSBA on the 29th, and then follow up with Planning Board and Concom. So in that week and a half time frame, you're going to have 4 different submissions coming out of the design group to really be off and running with those 3 separate permitting process, as well as the MSBA's peer review that they'll do. The MSBA takes 3 weeks to review and comment. We'll bring those comments back to you. They'll kick the tires on the overall project. The project team will then review and respond to those comments over a 2-week period. And by the beginning of June, we'll be officially done with design development entirely and on to the construction documents phase of the project. Dan, anything else I missed from a permitting process standpoint?
No, I think you've got pretty much all of it covered.
Okay.
So the 23rd will be a packed meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
And that one, we're at a different location. We're at the high school library because
Yes.
HCAM was busy. because we're talking about a lot of those complex topics, I figured that was best to still be in person, even though HCAM wasn't available. So we've penciled that in for the library over there. And so there'll still be, I think, a Zoom option to record, but we'd be live in that room at least.
Okay.
The only other update I had, I just wanted to introduce somebody from my team. Chris Kenny is joining us here as a face you're going to see. Chris Kenny's coming on board as a senior project manager, supporting Chris Eberly and I on the team. And so you'll start to see more and more Chris over the course of the project. So just wanted to introduce the name to the face.
Welcome, Chris, and at least we don't have to learn another first name.
Yeah, but I just got to keep them straight.
Yeah.
I got to start using last names instead of first names. But that's all I had, and I think that's all Bob and Dan had from a presentation update standpoint.
Okay.
I do need to ask what you named the school.
Yeah.
Charleswood.
What is it?
Charleswood.
Charleswood.
Start of the Charles River, combined with the wood as it's kind of like Elmwood, but also the woods in that area. One word.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there is nothing else, seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Nancy, second by Bill. Roll call vote, Jag Root,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So we are adjourned at 7:07. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, HCAM, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.